New York Dispatch, April 16, 1865. National calamity, a terrible crime. Death of President Lincoln. He is assassinated in Ford's Theater, Washington. A pistol ball through his brain. The deed deliberately planned. J. Wilkes Booth the assassin. Announcement by Secretary Stanton. Details of the murder. Scene at the president's deathbed. Attempt to assassinate Secretary Seward. He is dangerously wounded. Assistant Secretary of State messenger and nurse stabbed. $10,000 reward for arrest of the murderers. Proclamation from the War Department. Andrew Johnson inaugurated president. W.M. Hunter acting Secretary of State. No change to be made in the cabinet. Washington closely guarded. Official announcement to Minister Adams. The nation's grief, the land in mourning, affected the sad news in this city. Proclamation by Governor Fenton. The murderers not apprehended. Preparations for the funeral of the president. Official War Department, Washington, April 15, 11:30 a.m. To Major General Dix, this evening at 9:30 p.m. at Ford's Theater, the president, while sitting in his private box with Mrs. Lincoln, Mrs. Harris, and Major Rathburn, was shot by an assassin who suddenly entered the box and approached behind the president. The assassin then leaped upon the stage, brandishing a large dagger or knife, and made his escape in the rear of the theater. The pistol ball entered the back part of the president's head and penetrated nearly through the head. The wound is mortal. The president has been insensible ever since it was inflicted and is now dying. About the same hour, an assassin, whether the same or not, entered Mr. Seward's apartments, and under pretense of having a prescription, was shown to the secretary's sick chamber. The assassin immediately rushed to bed and inflicted 2 or 3 stabs on the throat and 2 on the face. It is hoped the wound may not be mortal. My apprehension is that they will prove fatal. The nurse alarmed Mr. Frederick Seward, who was in an adjoining room, and hastened to the door of his father's room when he met the assassin, who inflicted on him 1 or more dangerous wounds. The recovery of Frederick Seward is doubtful. It is not probable that the president will live through the night. General Grant and wife were advertised to be at the theater this evening, but he started to Burlington at 6 o'clock this evening. At a cabinet meeting, at which General Grant was present, the subject of the state of the country and the prospect of a speedy peace was discussed. The president was very cheerful and hopeful, and spoke very kindly of General Lee and others of Confederacy, and of the establishment of government in Virginia. All the members of the cabinet, except Mr. Seward, are now in attendance upon the president. I have seen Mr. Seward, but he and Frederick were both unconscious. Edwin M. Stanton, Secretary of War, Circular War Department, Provost Marshal General's Bureau, Washington, D.C., April 15, 9:49 a.m. It is believed that the assassins of the President and Secretary Seward are attempting to escape to Canada. You will make a careful and thorough examination of all persons attempting to cross from the United States into Canada, and will arrest all suspicious persons. The most vigilant scrutiny on your part, and the force at your disposal, is demanded. A description of the parties supposed to be implicated in the murder will be telegraphed you today. But in the meantime, be active in preventing the crossing of any suspicious persons. By order of the Secretary of War, H.L. Jeffers, BVD, Brigadier General, Acting Provost Marshal General, War Department, Washington, D.C., April 15th. For 10 a.m. Major General Dix. The President continues insensible and is sinking. Secretary Seward remains without change. Frederick Seward's skull is fractured in 2 places, beside a severe cut upon the head. The attendant is still alive, but hopeless. Major Seward's wound is not dangerous. It is now ascertained with reasonable certainty that 2 assassins were engaged in a horrible crime, Wilkes Booth being the one that shot the president, and the other companion of his whose name is not known, but whose description is so clear that he can hardly escape. It appears from a letter found in Booth's trunk that the murder was planned before the 4th of March, but fell through then because the accomplice backed out until Richmond could be heard from. Booth and his accomplice were at the livery stable at 6 o'clock last evening, and left there with their horses about 10 o'clock, or shortly before that hour. It would seem that they had for several days been seeking their chance, but for some unknown reason it was not carried into effect until last night. One of them has evidently made his way to Baltimore. The other has not yet been traced. E.M. Stanton, Secretary of War. War Department, Washington, April 15, 1865. Major General Dix. Abraham Lincoln died this morning at 22 minutes after 7 o'clock. Edwin M. Stanton, Secretary of War. Washington, April 15, 8:49 a.m. Major General Augur, commanding the Department of Washington, has offered a reward of $10,000 to the party or parties arresting the murder of the President and the assassin of the Secretary of State and his son. This morning at 6 o'clock, there was no change in the condition of Secretary Seward. The Chronicle says a letter found in J. Wilkes Booth's trunk identifies him as the murderer of the President. Particulars of the assassination of President Lincoln. Washington, April 15, 1865. The assassinator of President Lincoln left behind him his hat and a spur. The hat was picked up in the president's box and has been identified by parties to whom it has been shown as the one belonging to the suspected man, and accurately described as the one belonging to the suspected man by other parties not allowed to see it before describing it. The spur was dropped upon the stage, and that also has been identified as the one procured at a stable where the same man hired a horse in the evening. The gentleman who went to the Secretary of War to apprise him of the attack on Mr. Lincoln met at the residence of the former a man muffled in a cloak, who, when accosted by them, hastened away. It had been Mr. Stanton's intention to accompany Mr. Lincoln to the theater and occupy the same box, but the press of business prevented. It therefore seems evident that the aim of the plotters was to paralyze the country by at once striking down the head, the heart, and the arm of the country. As soon as the dreadful events were announced in the streets, Superintendent Richards and his assistants were at work to discover the assassin. In a few moments the telegraph had aroused the whole police force of the city. Mayor Wallach and several members of the city government were soon on the spot, and every precaution was taken to preserve order and quiet in the city. Every street in Washington was patrolled at the request of Mr. Richards. General Augur sent horses to mount the police. Every road leading out of Washington was strongly picketed, and every possible avenue of escape was thoroughly guarded. Steamboats about to depart down the Potomac were stopped. The Daily Chronicle says, as it is suspected that this conspiracy originated in Maryland, the telegraph flashed the mournful news to Baltimore, and all the cavalry was immediately put upon active duty. Every road was picketed, and every precaution taken to prevent the escape of the assassin. A preliminary examination was made by Messrs. Richards and his assistants. Several persons were called to testify, and the evidence as elicited before an informal tribunal and not under oath was conclusive to this point. The murderer of President Lincoln was John Wilkes Booth. His hat was found in the private box and identified by several persons who had seen him within the last 2 days, and the spur which he dropped by accident after he jumped to the stage was identified as one of those which he had obtained from the stable where he hired his horse. This man Booth had played more than once at Ford's Theater, and is, of course, acquainted with its exits and entrances, and the facility with which he escaped behind the scenes is easily understood. The person who assassinated Secretary Seward left behind him a slouched hat and an old rusty Navy revolver. The chambers were broken loose from the barrel, as if done by striking. The loads were drawn from the chambers, one being a rough piece of lead, and the other balls smaller than the chambers, wrapped in paper, as if to keep them from falling out. The attempted assassination of Secretary Seward. Washington, Saturday, April 15th, 8:30 a.m. Hopes are expressed this morning that Secretary Seward will survive his wounds. The surgeons evidently despair of the Assistant Secretary, Frederick Seward. The rebel assassin is described by the colored porter on duty at that entrance door of the house as a man in light pantaloons and a dark frock coat buttoned up about the size, to use his own words, of Mr. George E. Baker. He represented that he was sent by Dr. Verdi with a prescription of medicine for Secretary Seward, which he was told to deliver personally, with the doctor's instructions how it should be taken. The porter declined to admit him. A parley ensued, and full 5 minutes passed before the assassin effected admission into the house. With a directness of walk which would indicate a knowledge of the house, he went straight up to the secretary's bedroom and entered it. The character of physician was instantly thrown off, and that of a determined murderer put on. There were 4 persons in the room: Major Augustus Seward, Miss Fanny Seward, the secretary's daughter, a hired man nurse, and the chief messenger of the State Department, also acting as nurse. The secretary lay in bed on his back. The assassin jumped upon the bed and endeavored to cut the throat of his victim. He inflicted 3 different wounds upon it. While engaged in it, the man nurse had flung himself upon his bed and thrown his arms around him and striven to pull him off the bed. The murderer instantly reversed the action of his knife and stabbed and cut quickly over his shoulder and drove the nurse off his back. He then sprang from the bed and engaged in a fight for escape with all that opposed him. He stabbed the chief messenger dangerously in the breast, stabbed Major Seward in the arm and beat him over the head and face with a heavy pistol and disabled him, and attacked Frederick Seward, who had entered the room from an adjoining chamber, and gave him a scalp wound with his knife, which, strange to say, commenced at the forehead, passed over the top of the head, and extended part way down the back of the head, and then struck him, either with a pistol or a slung shot, a heavy blow, which knocked him down insensible. The way of escape was clear. The assassin ran downstairs, mounted his horse, and rode rapidly away. The secretary's throat has 3 distinct gashes. No artery has been severed, and although much effusion of blood has taken place, and a terrible shock given to his enfeebled system, hopes are entertained at his recovery. Frederick Seward sustained a fracture of the skull. Portions of the bone have been removed from the wound. The unfavorable symptoms of stupefaction and vomiting ensued upon the injury, and have characterized his condition during the night. Major Seward is about this morning, one arm in a sling and his head and face bandaged. The department messenger is considered to be dangerously wounded. The hired nurse's wounds are superficial, and although numerous, are not serious. The assassin is said to have been traced by the horse he rode, and which was hired from a livery stable here to Long Bridge, and over to Virginia. Both the man and the crime are the slave power. Washington, April 15th, 11 a.m. The Star Extra says, at 20 minutes past 7 o'clock, the president breathed his last, closed his eyes as if falling to sleep, and his countenance assuming an expression of perfect serenity. There were no indications of pain, and it was not known that he was dead until the gradually decreasing respiration ceased altogether. The Reverend Dr. Gurley of the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church, immediately on its being ascertained that life was extinct, knelt at the bedside and offered an impressive prayer, which was responded to by all present. Dr. Gurley then proceeded to the front parlor where Mrs. Lincoln, Captain Robert Lincoln, Mr. John Hay, the private secretary, and others were waiting, where he again offered prayer for the consolation of the family. The following minutes taken by Dr. Abbott show the condition of the late president throughout the night. 11 o'clock, pulse at 44. 11:05 o'clock, pulse at 45 and growing weaker. 11:10 o'clock, pulse at 45. 11:15 o'clock, pulse at 42. 11:20 o'clock, pulse at 45, respiration 27 to 29. 11:25 o'clock, pulse at 42. 11:32 o'clock, pulse at 48 and full. 11:40 o'clock, pulse at 45. 11:45 o'clock, pulse at 45, respiration 22. 12 o'clock, pulse at 48, respiration 22. 12:15 o'clock, pulse at 48, respiration 21. Ecmycosis, both eyes. 12:30 o'clock, pulse at 45. 12:32 o'clock, pulse at 60. 12:35 o'clock, pulse at 66. 12:40 o'clock, pulse at 69. Right eye much swollen and ecmyosis. 12:45 o'clock, pulse at 70. 12:55 o'clock, pulse at 80, struggling motion of arms. 1 o'clock, pulse at 86, respiration 30. 1:30 o'clock, pulse at 95, appearing easier. Surrounding the deathbed of the president were Secretary Stanton Wells, Usher, Attorney General Speed, Postmaster General Dennison, M.B. Field, Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, Judge Otto, Assistant Secretary of the Interior, General Halleck, General Meigs, Senator Sumner, B.F. Andrews of New York, General Todd of Dakota, John Hay, Private Secretary, Governor Oglesby of Illinois, General Farnsworth, Mrs. and Miss Kenny Miss Harris, Captain Robert Lincoln, son of the President and D.R.C.W. Abbott, R.K. Stone, O.D. Gatch, Neil Halt, and Mr. Lieberman. Secretary McCullough remained with the President until about 5 o'clock, and Secretary Chase, after several attendants during the night, returned early this morning. Immediately after the President's death, a cabinet meeting, was called by Secretary Stanton and held in the room in which the corpse lay. Secretaries Wells, Stanton, and Usher, Postmaster General Dennison, and Attorney General Speed were present. The results of the conference are as yet unknown. The above particulars concerning the president's death are from the Extra Evening Star. 1:45 o'clock. Pulse at 86, very quiet. Respiration irregular. Mrs. Lincoln present. 2:10 o'clock. Mrs. Lincoln retired with Robert Lincoln to an adjoining room. 2:30 o'clock. President very quiet. Pulse at 54. Respiration 28. 2:52 o'clock. Pulse at 48. Respiration 30. 3 o'clock. Visited again by Mrs. Lincoln. 3:25 o'clock. Respiration 24 and regular. 3:35 o'clock. Prayer by Reverend Dr. Garley. 4 o'clock. Respiration 26 and regular. 4:15 o'clock. Pulse at 60. Respiration 25. 5:50 o'clock. Respiration 28, regular. 6 o'clock. Pulse at failing and respiration 28. 6:30 o'clock. Still failing and labored breathing. 7 o'clock. Symptoms of immediate dissolution. 7:22 o'clock. Death. Since the death. Washington, April 15th, 1865. The president's body was removed from the private residence opposite Ford's Theater to the executive mansion this morning at 9:30 o'clock in a hearse and wrapped in the American flag. It was escorted by a small guard of cavalry, General Augur and other military officers following on foot. A dense crowd accompanied the remains to the White House, where a military guard excluded the crowd, allowing none but persons of the household and personal friends go the deceased to enter the premises. Senator Yates and Representative Farnsworth being among the number admitted. The body is being embalmed with a view to its removal to Illinois. Flags over the departments and throughout the city are half-mast. Scarcely any business is being transacted anywhere, either on private or public account. Our citizens, without any preconcert whatever, are draping their premises with festoons of mourning. The bells are tolling mournfully. All is the deepest gloom and sadness. Strong men weep in the streets. The grief is widespread and deep, and in strange contrast to the joys so lately manifested over our recent military victories. This is indeed a day of gloom. Reports prevail that Mr. Frederick W. Seward, who was kindly assisting the nursing of Secretary Seward, received a stab in the back. His shoulder blade prevented the knife or dagger from penetrating into his body. The prospects are that he will recover. The government departments are closed by order and will be draped with the usual emblems of mourning. The roads leading to and from the city are guarded by the military, and the utmost circumspection is observed as to all attempting to enter or leave the city. Among the circumstances tending to fix a participation in the crime on Booth were letters found in his trunk, one of which, apparently from a lady, supplicated him to desist in the perilous undertaking in which he was about to embark, as the time was inauspicious, the mine not yet being ready to be sprung. The extra intelligencer says, from the evidence obtained, it is entered highly probable that the man who stabbed Mr. Seward and his sons is John Surratt of Prince George County, Maryland. The horse he rode was hired at Naylor's stable on 14th Street. Surratt is a young man with light hair and goatee. His father is said to have been postmaster of Prince George County. About 11 o'clock last night, 2 men crossed the Anacostia Bridge, one of whom gave his name as Booth and the other as Smith. The latter is believed to be John Surratt. Last night, a riderless horse was found, which had been identified by the proprietor of one of the stables previously mentioned as having been hired from his establishment. Accounts are conflicting as to whether Booth crossed the bridge on horseback or on foot, but as it is believed that he rode across it, it is presumed that he had exchanged his horse. From information in the possession of the authorities, it is evident that the scope of the plot was intended to be much more comprehensive. The vice president and other prominent members of the administration were particularly inquired for by suspected parties, and the precise localities accurately obtained, but providentially. In their cases, the scheme miscarried. A boat was at once sent down the Potomac to notify the gunboats on the river of the awful crime, in order that all possible means should be taken for the arrest of the perpetrators. The most ample precautions have been taken, and it is not believed the culprits will long succeed in escaping the overtaking arm of justice. Inauguration of Vice President Johnson as President of the United States. Washington, April 15, 12 o'clock. At an early hour this morning, the Honorable Edwin M. Stanton, Secretary of War, sent an official communication to Andrew Johnson, Vice President of the United States, stating that in consequence of the sudden and unexpected death of the Chief Magistrate, his inauguration should take place as soon as possible, and requesting him to state the place and hour at which the ceremony should be performed. Mr. Johnson immediately replied that it would be agreeable to him to have the proceedings take place at his rooms in the Kirkwood House as soon as the arrangements could be perfected. Chief Justice Chase was informed of the fact and repaired to the appointed place in company with Secretary McCullough of the Treasury Department, Attorney General Speed, J.P. Blair, Senator Honorable Montgomery Blair, Senators Foote of Vermont, Ramsey of Minnesota, Yates of Illinois, Stewart of Nevada, Hale of New Hampshire, and General Farnsworth of Illinois. At 11 o'clock, the oath of office was administered by the Chief Justice of the United States in his usual solemn and impressive manner. Mr. Johnson received the kind expressions of the gentleman by whom he was surrounded in a manner which showed his earnest sense of the great responsibilities so suddenly devolved upon him, and made a brief speech in which he said, "The duties of the office are mine. I will perform them. The consequences are with God. Gentlemen, I shall lean upon you. I feel that I shall need your support. I am deeply impressed with the solemnity of the occasion and the responsibility of the duties of the office I am assuming." Mr. Johnson appeared to be in remarkably good health and has a high and realizing sense of the hopes that are centered upon him. His manner was solemn and dignified, and his whole bearing produced a most gratifying impression upon those who participated in the ceremonies. It is probable that during the day President Johnson will issue his first proclamation to the American people. Official, War Department, Washington, April 15th, 3 p.m. Major General Dix, New York. At 12 o'clock, the President met the heads of departments in cabinet meeting at the Treasury Building, and among other business, the following was transacted. First, the arrangements for the funeral of the late President were referred to the several secretaries, as far as relates to their respective departments. Second, William Hunter, Esquire, was appointed acting Secretary of State during the disability of Mr. Seward, and his son, Frederick Seward, the Assistant Secretary. Third, the President formally announced that he desired to retain the present secretaries of departments of his cabinet, and they would go on and discharge their respective duties in the same manner as before the deplorable event that had changed the head of the government. All business in the departments was suspended during the day. The surgeons report that the condition of Mr. Seward remains unchanged. He is doing well. No improvement in Mr. Frederick Seward. The murderers have not yet been apprehended. It is expected, though nothing has not been definitely determined upon, that the funeral of the late President Lincoln will take place on or about Thursday next. It is supposed that his remains will be temporarily deposited in the Congressional Cemetery. Official announcement to Minister Adams. The following dispatch from the State Department was received this afternoon by Mr. J.C. Derby, United States Dispatch agent in this city, with instructions to send a copy to Mr. Adams at London by the steamer today, if received in time. Washington, April 15th. The sad duty devolves upon me to announce the assassination of the President at Ford's Theater last night by a pistol shot from a person who entered the box for the purpose. The assassin escaped, but it is supposed has been arrested. The President died at 7:30 o'clock this morning. Vice President Johnson has assumed the functions of President, having been sworn in by the Chief Justice. About the same time an attempt is made by, it is believed, a different person to assassinate Mr. Seward, but the murderer only succeeded in inflicting painful and severe wounds principally upon his face. Mr. F.W. Seward was beaten over the head with a heavy weapon in the hands of the person who attacked his father and grievously hurt. His brother was also wounded by the dagger of the assassin, as was Mr. Hansel, a messenger of the department, who was with the secretary and the male nurse in attendance. William Hunter, acting Secretary of State. This dispatch came in time to send a message to Minister Adams by the steamer, which left Portland at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Proclamation of Governor Fenton. Executive Chamber, Albany, April 15th, 1865. The fearful tragedy at Washington has converted an occasion of rejoicing over national victories into one of national mourning. It is fitting, therefore, that the 20th of April, heretofore set apart as a day of thanksgiving, should now be dedicated to services appropriate to a season of national bereavement. bowing reverently to the providence of God. Let us assemble in our places of worship on that day to acknowledge our dependence on him, who has brought sudden darkness on the land in the very hour of its restoration to union, peace, and liberty. In witness whereof I have here run to set my hand, and have fixed the privy seal of the state at the city of Albany, this 15th day of April, in the year of our Lord 1865. Signed, R. E. Fenton, by the Governor, G.O.S. Hastings, Private Secretary. Secretary, Seward no worse. To C. A. Seward, from a member of the family. Washington, April 15th, 3:45 p.m. Secretary Seward has been informed of the death of Mr. Lincoln and of the critical condition of Frederick, who is still unconscious. The governor is no worse, and his physicians feel hopeful of him. In the city, the feeling in the city, as it has been given expression, is most intense. Stores of all kinds were closed early yesterday and draped in mourning. In the afternoon, hardly a place of business remained open. The assassination of the president was the only subject of comment. Meeting in Wall Street. At about half past 11 o'clock, a carriage, containing General Butler, came driving down Nassau Street into Wall Street, followed by a large crowd, shouting after the stop, which it finally did in front of the Custom House in William Street. Meanwhile, the large concourse of people who had gathered around the street took positions in front of the building, calling upon the general to come out. After a meeting had been organized by the appointment of Simeon Draper, Esquire, as president, General Butler was presented and made a speech. He said that a few days ago the people waved the flags which now are draped in mourning in joy over our late victories, and upon the prospect of a near and glorious peace. Then we assembled in gladness, but today we are gathered in grief for the loss of that noble, good, generous man, the greatest statesman of the age, Abraham Lincoln. Though struck down by the sorrow of the event, the people had higher duties to perform. They had to see that his death was not lost to country. Other rebellions had been inaugurated by assassinations, but this wicked rebellion, in his dying gasp, gave the murderous blow to the chief magistrate of a great country, and even struck down a dying old man on his bed of agony. It showed at its death the blind hatred toward the people by striking down the most powerful, most lenient, most precious friend its leaders had in this hour, when they surely needed him most. How must these wicked men who have nurtured this hatred feel toward others if they kill those who had done them good? The strength of the rebellion was crushed, but its soul should be crushed, or there would be no peace. The spirit of the rebellion was not gone with its army. It sat deeper among the leaders, and they should be brought to punishment. There was no reason to despair. The life of Mr. Lincoln was providentially saved 4 years ago, and now that he had done what he meant to do, the people should do the little he left undone, and kill the soul of the rebellion. This was Mr. Johnson's object, and he was not only willing, but able to do it. Had Mr. Lincoln foreseen what was to ensue, he would not have pursued the course of clemency, which meant death to him as forgiveness meant assassination. In closing, the general asked the people to demand serious punishment for all who brought on or participated in the rebellion. Honorable Daniel S. Dickinson followed, and also Major General Peck, General Garfield of Ohio, Honorable Moses Grinnell, Honorable L. E. Chittenden. The following resolution was adopted by the meeting. Resolved, that this meeting, in view of the nation's bereavement in the death of Abraham Lincoln, recommended the citizens of New York to wear the usual badge of mourning for 30 days. The courts. There was a general suspension of business in all the courts of the city and Brooklyn yesterday. Flags were at half-mast, and many were the expressions of sorrow at the sudden and terrible tragedy which deprived the nation of its head, as an expression of the deep and all-pervading regret felt for the death of the president. The city is already in general mourning. All the public and private buildings are draped. The newspaper offices also show outside expressions of woe, and flags were at half-mast everywhere. Custom House, New York. Collector's Office, April 15, 1865. To all persons attached to the Customs Department of the District of New York. Sirs, anticipating your proposed resolution in such regard, I hereby announce to you that it will be in order to wear crape on the left arm for 30 days next succeeding this date, as an ember of honor and respect to our departed president. S. Draper, Collector. Meeting of the Navy Yard Painters. Painters Department, U.S. Navy Yard, New York, April 15, 1865. On the announcement of the death by assassination of our much respected and highly esteemed Chief Magistrate of these United States, the Department assembled and passed the following resolutions. Whereas, God in his all-wise providence has seen fit to the hand of the ruthless assassin to remove from the head of this nation the hope and pride of the loyal people of these United States. Therefore, resolved that this department is profoundly sensible of the great loss sustained by the people of these United States in the death of Abraham Lincoln. Resolved that in contemplating the character of the deceased, we most naturally and fondly revert to those qualities of his mind and heart which grace his personal demeanor and intercourse, to the ever-cheerful temper, the warm affection and general intercourse, the fresh and playful spirit, and to the rare, varied, and extensive requirements of our late President. Resolved that while thus mindful of the personal attraction now lost us forever, we should not omit to testify our high appreciation of the learning, the clear and persuasive method of reasoning, the nice power of discrimination, unwavering industry, strict sense of justice, inflexible integrity, and great practical wisdom, which illustrated and adorned his career as Chief Magistrate of these United States. Resolved that we tender the expression condolence to the afflicted family of the deceased and to the loyal people of the United States, and that a copy of these resolutions, signed by the committee, be published. George W. Freed, John D. Hand, Edward W. Mooney, Charles Atkinson, Joseph H. Edgerly, John Mitchell, Committee. Sketch of President Lincoln's life. The incidents in the life of Abraham Lincoln are as generally known throughout the country that there is no special call for an extended biographical notice at this time. Born on the 12th of February, 1809, in Hardin County, Kentucky, Mr. Lincoln's early life was spent in poverty and toil. His father, Thomas Lincoln, removed from his homestead in Kentucky when Abraham was in his 8th year and settled in Spencer County, Indiana. After spending 12 years in their new home, the family emigrated to Decatur, Illinois, where Abraham hired himself out as a farmhand to the neighbors or as a clerk in a store. In 1832, when the Black Hawk War broke out, he joined a volunteer company and was chosen captain. He was recorded as an efficient, faithful officer, watchful as men, and prompt in the discharge of his duty, and his courage and patriotism shrank from no dangers or hardships. After his military life, he ran for the Illinois legislature, but was defeated. He subsequently failed in business and was appointed postmaster. In 1844, he was sent to the legislature, and when the session was over, he commenced the study of law and obtained a license of practice in partnership with his friend and former colleague in the legislature, Honorable John T. Stewart. In 1847, Mr. Lincoln was elected to Congress as the only Whig representative from Illinois. While in the House, he then introduced a bill to abolish slavery in the District of Columbia. His nomination and election as president in 1860 and 1864 are subjects of which all are fully cognizant. The Civil War which followed, the hundreds of thousands slain, the Act of Emancipation, and other events which have rendered the last 4 years the most memorable in the history of the nation, need no recital here. It is a strangely dramatic conclusion to see so eventful a life, that just as the war which had made memorable his first term of office was coming to a close, and on the 4th anniversary of the surrender of Fort Sumter, he should be assassinated, and that, too, at the national capital. The assassin of President Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth. Sketch of the life of John Wilkes Booth. His family, antecedents, age, political sentiments, professional career, etc., etc. John Wilkes Booth, whose portrait appears above, is a son of Junius Brutus Booth, the celebrated English tragedian, who came to this country about the year 1828. He is, we understand, the youngest of 4 children, Junius Brutus, Jr., Rosalie, married to J.S. Clark the actor, Edwin, and himself. He is the son by a second wife, and is now about 26 years of age. He is described as being a fine-looking man, standing about 5 feet 9 inches, and having dark eyes, dark hair, and a fair complexion. His father, on coming to this country, played several times at Richmond, Virginia, before visiting New York and the other eastern cities. The place where he appears to have fixed his residence was Baltimore. Here it was that John W. and the other children, Junius and Rosalie excepted, were born. The elder Booth played frequently at the Park Theater in this city, and found the appreciation which his high tragic talent deserved. Indeed, The reputation of the sons is in a great degree owing to the fathers. The family while here moved in very good society, boarding at our best hotels. They are said to have been fond of good living, and latterly it is said that John has been addicted to too frequent indulgence in the intoxicating cup. His status as a tragic actor has never been very high in the estimation of good theatrical critics. He could, however, split the ears of groundlings. He graduated at William and Mary College, Maryland, and 3 years ago he appeared at Inn and Garden as Richard III and was considered to have made a decided hit. The next evening as Charles D'Amour in The Robbers. Recently he has not played extensively, but rumor says that he has been extensively engaged in the oil business and has realized about $100,000, like his two brothers, Edwin and Junius Brutus. He inherited and early manifested a predilection for the stage, and is well known to theater-goers and the public generally as a fine-looking young man, but as an actor of more promise than performance. He is best remembered, perhaps, in Richard, which he played closely after his father's conception of that character, and by his admirers was considered superior to the elder Booth. He was quite popular in the western and southern cities, and his last extended engagement was, we believe, in Chicago. We have heard excellent actors say, and actors are not overapt to praise each other, that he had inherited some of the most brilliant qualities of his father's genius. But, of late, an apparently incurable bronchial affection has made almost every engagement a failure. The papers and critics have apologized for his hoarseness, but it has long been known by his friends that he would be compelled to abandon the stage. He is of a passionate and enthusiastic nature, and was easily excited upon any subject. In acting he often became madly frenzied, and theatrical record is full of anecdote of the mishaps of brother actors who have played with him, particularly in the fencing scenes of such pieces as Richard III and Macbeth. While playing the former character in the city a few years ago, he threw the Richmond of the evening off the stage into the orchestra among the drums and fiddles. Although publicly he had no politics, yet his sentiments were well known by all who were intimate with him as in full sympathy with the rebellion and its most rabid leaders. His frame was light and nervous. He frequently gave himself up to periods of dissipation, which rendered him next to a madman. It is said by some that he was given to opium eating. It is to be hoped that the mad actor John Wilkes will not be allowed to reflect upon Edwin. For the information of those who do not know Mr. Edwin Booth's opinions, and who may imagine that sentiments are inherited with family names, we will say that he has been a thorough Union man. He has on different occasions, here and elsewhere, performed for the benefit of the Sanitary Commission, and in many other ways has shown his sympathy with the Union cause. We are informed that political differences had caused a serious quarrel between Mr. Booth and his brother some time ago, and that within a month Edwin had turned him forever from his house in 19th Street, where the mother of both live. Edwin is now in Boston, playing an engagement. His health since the death of his wife, about a year since, has not been firm, and it is to be feared that our most eminent tragedian, as well as the president himself, may fall before the shock given him by the assassin. J. Wilkes Booth was in the city some 3 or 4 days ago, and is said to have been accompanied to Washington by a very particular friend of his named Canning, whose description exactly fits that given by Secretary Seward, the man who attempted to assassinate him. Whether he is the one or not remains to be seen. The last time the assassin played in New York was for the benefit of the Shakespeare Monument Fund, at the Winter Garden, on the night of the 25th of November, 1864. The play was Julius Caesar, and with a cast including the 3 Booth brothers, Edwin as Brutus, Junius as Cassius, and John Wilkes as Mark Antony. If it indeed true that he is the assassin of the president, the universal indignation which will consign him to lasting infamy will not prevent the profoundest sympathy and sorrow for those who are allied to him by blood. Booth for some time past has been very much given to drunkenness, and in his intoxicated moods was very violent in his secession views. Ordinarily, he was as mild a mannered man as ever cut a throat or scuttled a ship. A sort of hoarseness induced by his frequent potations had pretty much destroyed his voice, and he had left the stage forever. He is now damned in his own conscience and to all eternity. Today a wanderer in the wilds of Virginia, if not yet secured, stung by the remorse of his own conscience, followed by the curses of a nation whose chief he has murdered, he undoubtedly suffers all the pangs that the human mind can suffer. Fly where he may, he will ever see before him the ghastly face of the noble man whom he has murdered, and seek in vain amid the temporary insanity of the drunkard's bowl, a forgetfulness of his crime, and a release from the pangs of an outraged conscience. There will be no rest for him on this earth until the felon's cell shall enclose him. That God may bless the success of the man whom he sent so suddenly into eternity is the prayer of every lover of his country,